Namaskar. Good morning, everyone. Uh, this is Ravi Gupta. I'm a founder and CEO of Philips Techno Media Private Limited. We have been working in the field of innovations and governance for last 17 years, and we bring out a magazine called eGov, which is India's and Asia's first magazine on e-governance. And today we are talking about the challenges of the COVID-19 situation in the urban and rural landscape and initiatives in Mandsaur district and the way forward. And we are joined today with Shri Rishabh Gupta, who is an IS officer. He is the additional collector and CEO of Jila Panchayat District Mandsaur, uh, which is based out of Madhya Pradesh. Just also to mention to our audience who are live on with us on the Facebook from our e-health handle also that we have been bringing on a magazine called e-health for last 15 years, and again which talks about innovation in healthcare. So the COVID-19 situation is a both a health disaster and also a challenge in governance. So we are going to discuss with Rishabh ji about the what are the challenges and how the government has dealt with it in his district. And before we start that discussion, I will request Rishabh ji to please talk about bit about his education and career and what inspired him to join the IS services, so that the audience gets a context about and a background about our speaker. Welcome, Rishabh ji. Please.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Rishabh. I belong to Haryana state. I have done my schooling from Panchkula and then my graduation from IIT Delhi in electrical engineering. I am a 2010 pass out of IIT Delhi. Then in 2014, I joined civil services in my second attempt. So basically, what we see like the problems in the society and how to tackle them, those are the basic, I think, the motivations for me to join the services.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rishabh. Please tell about the COVID-19 situation in your district and how it has got addressed. I think your numbers in your district are very low until now. So how are you managing this situation?
So first of all, let's talk a bit about the Mandsaur district. So Mandsaur district has a population of around 14 lakhs. It has an area of around 10,000 square kilometers. It is situated in the Malwa region of Western Madhya Pradesh. It has around 950 villages and around 10 urban bodies. It is bordered by 4 districts of Rajasthan. Now it is very interesting also to see and that it is one of the very few districts that have allowed open cultivation of opium. Also, the people here are very culturally rich and also they are very business friendly. So keeping all these things in mind, they have traditionally contacts with the rest of the world quite a lot as compared to other districts, especially the region of Middle East, especially the region of China. So that makes Mandsaur a very special district with respect to the COVID crisis management. Now, if we talk about the status of COVID, till today, 27th, we have received 9 cases so far. Out of them, 2 have been received in the villages and 7 have been received in urban areas. Now, if we talk about the strategy, now this is going to be a really long one. The strategies that we have adopted includes 2 components. First, the peacetime efforts. Now, peacetime efforts means the preventive efforts. And second, the wartime efforts. The wartime, what we can say, is the efforts that we make after we get a positive case. So as an old saying goes that the prevention is much better than cure. So at the beginning, I would like to say and state very clearly that what goes on inside the hospitals is definitely a important component, but it's a very small component as compared to what the administration is doing outside the hospitals. So as a preventive part basically. And that has a much wider ambit. So first let's talk about the peacetime or the preventive operations that we take. Starting from the proactive surveillance. Proactive surveillance means that we have formed micro plans. There are health teams that are working round the clock throughout the district that are following the same pattern that we used to follow in the polio campaign, the Pulse Polio campaign. The health workers are there, they're going home to home, they are doing the checkups, then they're taking the history, whether they have a history of coming from a district where the number of cases are more, and we are noting down all those readings in case someone is found to be symptomatic. Then additional care is taken in the form of responsive surveillance. So the second part is the responsive surveillance part. And yes, in the active surveillance, we have covered more than 12 lakh of our population so far. So coming to the responsive surveillance, we have formed first a district control room. Now district control room has 3 numbers. These 3 numbers have been very well disseminated across the population. We get around more than 200 calls per day. And also the teams that are doing active surveillance, they report to the control room that these people are found, those seem to be symptomatic. Now the control room has on its disposal more than 71 mobile medical units and more than 12 rapid response teams. Mobile medical units and rapid response teams are basically consisting of different teams, again of health workers, but they are of a higher level as compared to the active surveillance teams. So these consist of paramedics such as auxiliary nurse midwives, MPWs, multi-purpose health workers, and the rapid response teams consist of doctors, lab technicians, and pharmacists. So these teams, they go actually to the places where they find that there are actually symptomatic patients. They treat them on the spot, and if the condition allows, they transfer them to the quarantine facility, or if again the need allows, and if it is followed by the ICMR protocol, then the sample is also taken. So this is the second component of responsive surveillance. Then the third is the resource management part. The first is the physical resource. As a lot talked about, PP management, the N95 mask management, so these are being taken care of so that when the need arises, we have them in plenty. Secondly, ventilators. Ventilator management is one of the most important component in tackling this disease. So not only we are arranging for the ventilators from wherever we can get, the ventilators that were long not in a working condition, we have repaired them and put them in our facilities. Also, apart from the doctors, there are many other people who are working on the field. For example, people who are in the burial grounds, in the cremation grounds, people they are working with the dead bodies. They also need some kits. So we are arranging for the makeshift PPEs for them, protective kits for them. After the physical resource management, we have the human resource management. The human resource management basically consists of training. There are many nurses which didn't even see a ventilator before. They have been trained for online modules, as well as they have been trained given on the job training. They have been put on roster to the hospitals where the ventilators are used. And now we have quite an equipped staff that is actually capable of handling the disease whenever it comes in a large form. After the resource management, we also have the home quarantine management. The home quarantine management is basically the bulwark against this spread of the disease. If home quarantine is done in a perfect way, then we can very well assume that we will be able to control the spread of the disease. So people who are symptomatic, people who have come from places that are infected, people, those who get discharged out of institutional quarantine, and people from whom samples are taken. All such people are home quarantined. We are having them filling a Shapath Patra for us, basically that they will not go out of their homes. Then we have community surveillance teams in each village, in each ward of the urban area that ensure that people who have been quarantined, they do not get out of their homes. Then we have 24-hour working control rooms that have telemedicine facility with them. They regularly get in touch with the persons in quarantine. They ask for the health. If their symptoms deteriorate, then they get free treatment through telemedicine. And if the condition permits, then we transfer them to the institutional quarantine also. One major thing with the home quarantine is that people tend to get depressed. So we have also arranged in Mandsaur a call center for mental or psychological counseling. The fifth important component is immunity boosting of the society. As per the Ayush department's guidelines, two very effective methods for boosting the immunity are Ayurvedic Kada, and secondly, homeopathic medicine is there called Arsenicum album 30. In our villages, we are promoting the Ayurvedic medicine, while in our urban areas, we are promoting the homeopathic medicine. Till now, we have covered more than 2.5 lakh families, and they have been supplied with this medicine. On war footing, such medicines have been prepared, and the distribution networks have been prepared such that these medicines reach the villages up to the remotest level. The next component of the preventive measures comes the hospital management. Now, this is one learning that we have taken from various countries. For example, Italy. In Italy, we saw that hospitals became a major source of infection for other people. So the most important thing is that we should not mix up the hospitals. We cannot treat a patient who is dying out of cancer in the same hospital that treats patient of COVID, because then the danger of infection sets in. We might be able to infect people who were otherwise not suffering from corona. So we have distributed the hospitals and divided them in three categories. First, we have dedicated COVID hospitals taking care of severe symptoms, patients suffering from severe symptoms of COVID. Second, we have the health centers, and third, we have the care centers. Again, these three centers have been built according to the symptoms of the patient of COVID. And these three centers are completely segregated from the other hospitals that are taking care of patients who are not suffering from corona. Next is establishment of quarantine centers across the district. We have identified 12 places across the district where we have set up quarantine centers. Those places are basically hostels. So we have trained the hostel cooks, the hostel cleaners, how to deal with patients who are showing very mild symptoms or who are suspect patients. Then we have a biomedical waste management protocol also in hospitals. Now, till now, this waste management protocol used to be following only on the hospitals. But now, since we have made quarantine facilities, we need to follow these protocols throughout the district. So we have red bags, we have blue bags, we have yellow bags, we have white bags, all for different. One for sharps, one for human waste, one for syringes, etc. So these kind of protocols are being followed throughout the quarantine centers. And lastly, private hospitals have been roped in. The next component of the preventive measures is basically the IEC activities, or the information, education and communication activities. Since this is a new disease, the protocols are being changed on a weekly basis. Even we don't know much about the disease, and as we get to read about scientific studies, we change our protocols accordingly. So it's very important that the data is regularly maintained such that pattern following can be observed and more research about the disease can take place. So we have a dedicated staff of around 30 people who is looking after data management and the IEC activities. Also, as I told earlier, IEC activities are important with respect to the psychological counseling of the patient, because patients tend to get depressed in the disease. And we have seen certain kinds of incidents happening in other places of India. Then we are focusing on testing and sampling. We have the guidelines given to us by ICMR. According to the guidelines, we are taking tests. We are taking the samples. The persons who are being sampled are home quarantined. And lastly, one more effort that we are doing is that we are also focusing upon other diseases. It should not be the case that while focusing upon corona alone, we allow people to suffer from other diseases. For example, the maternal and child health, for example, the non-communicable disease program, the blindness program, the HIV program, all these programs are continuously running. We have a backup team that is allowing that these programs are actually being covered in the district as they should be covered in the normal times. So these are the components of the preventive measures that we are taking. Now the second strategy comes, it is like what we do when a positive case comes. So there are four major mechanisms which we handle after a positive case comes. First is marking of containment zones. Now this is the most important strategy to handle COVID. We should not allow a patient to infect other patients. So whenever we get the result of a sample as positive, immediately the person is transferred from that place to a place, either a COVID hospital or a COVID health center. Secondly, we have a dedicated team of 25 people. Those are only doing what we call contact tracing. For the past 14 days, whatever the contacts of the patients are, they are traced. Those people are taken and sent to the quarantine center. They are taken under observation. For the high-risk patients, we take the samples. Secondly, we cordon off the area. The area cordon off is around 1 kilometer or 2 kilometers radius of the person's residence. So the area is cordoned off using pipes from the PHE department, barricades from the PWD department, or bans, balli from the forest department, and we make sure that no one enters the area. We have a single point of exit and entry that is manned by us. All the people inside the quarantines, they are not supposed to go to kirana shops or anywhere else. This supply is maintained and controlled by us in a door-to-door fashion. Milk, LPG, water, medicines, all the supply reaches them in a home delivery system. Secondly, as soon as the containment zone is made, we have a dedicated team of health workers that goes door to door and checks every person whether he is symptomatic or not. And once he is found symptomatic, again, according to the protocol, whether he is home quarantined or institutional quarantined or his sample is taken. So these are the basic things which we take care in a containment area. Second is the quarantine, the institutional quarantine. All the first contacts are sent to the institutional quarantine. Now, the doctors and the paramedics have been specifically trained to treat all these as suspects. So we have taken care of the protective measures, the PPE kits, the N95 masks, the social distancing parameters in the hospitals itself, so that our doctors do not get infected. And thirdly, we go for the hospital management. The patient is actually shifted to the hospital. So inside the hospital, the doctors who are actually taking care of the patient. Now we have designated hotels for them. They do not go back to their homes. They stay in the hotels so as to protect their own families. Second, again, the psychological or the mental counseling is given to all the patients that are residing both in the quarantine ward as well as those are residing in the COVID hospital. And lastly, we are following the protocol of dead body management. Now, this is important. All the deaths that take place inside the containment zone or even outside, and those who are even lightly suspected that they might have died of corona. So after the dead body comes out of mortuary, the role of district administration kicks in. We take care that the protocols of the dead body disposal are followed. The crematories and the burial grounds are disinfected. The number of people who are attending the crematories are limited. We do not allow more than 10 to 15 people to go and visit the crematories while the last rites are being carried out. So I think in these two components, we are basically devised a strategy to deal with corona.
Fantastic, Rishabh. I think you explained in great detail about the various stages of this disaster and how you are dealing it inside the hospital, outside the hospital, preventive measures, all aspects you have mentioned about. Great efforts are being made in your district and your panchayat. Thanks for this initiative. I want to ask you about the situation, as you mentioned about it, it's like a lot of the rural area which in your Jilla Panchayat exists. And I
Yes.
like this is a harvest season. So how this issue of like harvesting and supply to mandis and APMC mandis has been handled. So if you can explain about that.
Yes. So this has been an important, we can say, a discussion point, whether to allow the procurement, whether to allow the mandis to operate, and how to dispose of the harvest. Because at the same time, we are following the social distancing parameters. So this has been actually a very important task in front of us, and for the past 15 days, we are working on it. So first of all, there were three components to it. First, there were the items that are of perishable nature. For example, a lot of oranges are grown in Mandsaur district. And the harvesting time of oranges is right about this time, around Feb or March. So the trucks and the labors that are required to pluck the oranges, they were not available first of all. So we had to have, we decided to have some training sessions for unskilled labor. They were imparted the skills of how to pluck the oranges, how to sort them, how to categorize them, and how to pack them. Once that was ensured, coordination was made between various other places like Maharashtra, Delhi, Panchkula, from where the buyers actually come and buy our product. So the trucks were arranged and the product was shipped off. Second important issue was that of grains, that is wheat. Mandsaur is an area where a lot of wheat is grown in the Rabi season or the winter season. And now the farmers also need cash in their hands. So in order to deal with the situation that how to operate the mandis and how to start the procurement, first of all, we increased the number of centers where we can do such activities. In normal circumstances, last year, for example, we used to have around 40 centers for the procurement. This time we increased the centers to more than 100. So basically not more than 6-7 villages were there for each center. And then we strictly implemented the SMS system. A farmer will only come when he receives a particular time and date on the SMS. And if he comes on any other time, we are doing very ruthlessly, we are returning him such that the social distancing can be maintained. We are striving that not more than 30 people are there on any procurement center. Second, the mandi operations. Again, two aspects to it. First, we are trying to maintain the mandi operations near the source area, that is near the farmer's residence. There we are doing most of our buying. And secondly, even if farmer has to come to mandis, then we are following the social distancing parameters. We are, like for example, some nudge often works with respect to human psychology. If we keep on announcing that, yes, please maintain distance, maintain 1 meter distance, people tend to follow less. But if we do certain nudges, for example, making some crosses or circles or lines on the ground, and then people are advised to please stand on the lines, stand on the circles, then people tend to follow such small nudges. So we have tried to inculcate all these parameters in our buying, in our procurement, such that the crowd management is controlled and at the same time, people receive cash in their hands. Secondly, with respect to the cash in their hands, many times we are doing DBT, direct benefit transfer. For example, in the procurement, we are transferring money to their bank accounts. The pensions that they get, that are transferred to the bank accounts, the subsidies that they get, they are often transferred in the bank accounts. Now there is a high risk that people might crowd the banks in order to get money in this interval. So what we have done in Mandsaur, is that we have used the banking correspondent model, the BC model. For each Gram Panchayat, we have a designated BC of a bank. Using the Aadhaar enabled payment systems, we have provided that the people will get their money within their Gram Panchayats. So we have designated an office, a temporary office for all the BCs in the respective government buildings of the Gram Panchayats. There we have, through the communication and through announcement, we have told people that in order to get their cash, they need not go to banks, they just need to come to Gram Panchayats, and there they will get the money through Aadhaar. So I think that system has worked well. We are seeing very less crowd in banks, and even in banks we are making sure that the approach of circles and the crosses and the marks are taking place, and people are maintaining social distance if they have to come to it.
Fantastic. Another question is about the door-to-door delivery of food supply, because there is a lockdown, so and people don't have to travel much. So, how are you handling this issue? And especially you have far-flung areas, rural areas. So it would be a challenge, I suppose.
Yes. Social distancing has been our prime concern right from the beginning of the lockdown. So the major challenge for the social distance parameter or paradigm is that how to ensure the supply of goods and the line of supply is maintained. Now for that, we have a different approach in urban area and villages. In our villages, what we have done is we have formed community surveillance teams. The community surveillance teams consists of the Gram Pradhan, the Sachiv, the Rozgar Sahayak, Asha, Anganwadi, the salesman, and the Gram Chaukidar. These people always follow the paradigm of social distancing. We have trained them how to ensure that while there's a grocery on wheels or thela of fruits, vegetables, when they reach the places, people do not actually crowd those. Secondly, these retail vendors, when they go to the wholesale sabzi market or the fruit market, then again in those sabzi market, we have strictly implemented the social distancing parameter. In the urban setup, we have a different approach. There we are allowing companies like Zomato, companies like Flipkart, and there are other local companies also that are doing delivery. They have their designated staff. We have given passes to them. Only the designated staff with passes can go and to each doorstep and supply stuff. Also, with respect to distribution of food packets, in the urban areas, this has been a major concern, the distribution of food packets. So for that, the distribution of food is strictly happening under our control, under a system of 20 people. We have not allowed everyone to go and distribute. Any help is welcome. They can make the food packages, they can supply to this designated team of 20 people, and only these people will go to places like shelter homes, bus stands, stations, temples, where people, those who are actually in need, they get the food.
Please also tell about the supply chain management inside and outside the district. Like there would be essential items which you have to get from outside the districts, and there would be essential items which your panchayat or your area supplies to other parts of it. So if you are you allowing trucks to move inside and outside the district, and how is that movement happening?
The good part about the lockdown was that it was restricted only to the movement of people. It was not actually restricted to the movement of goods. So the trucks, the containers, they have been coming like in the past, but what we have maintained is that the people who are traveling with the containers, for example, the drivers, the cleaners, they are regularly checked at all the entry points, at the checkposts. The vehicles are sanitized, but there is no issue of the movement of supply goods.
And please also tell about the how there would be a lot of poor people who would be having daily wages and they not having food. So how
Yes.
are you handling that issue?
This was a major concerns right at the beginning of the lockdown. We have categorized into two components. First, the labor who is residing in our own district and doesn't need to move out. But they are very poor and they are only dependent upon the daily wages. So the strategy for them includes, first of all, as a government policy we had, giving them in advance 3 months ration from the previous shops. Second, but these can only be given to those people who have ration cards. But again, there are people who are very poor and do not possess even ration cards. For those people, as a government policy at the disposal of the district magistrate, we were given some amount of food grains. We prepared a list of people who are in dire need, village-wise, those whose names are not there in the ration list. Those lists then were taken to the public representatives. The lists were vetted, some names were added, some removed, and the final lists were maintained. Then from those lists, we started distributing some amount of food grains. Then we received the challenge that there were some people who were going to shops and selling the food grains. We got to know what was the actual reason why they are selling the food grains. Basically, they are very poor. So the reason that we understood was that while they got enough food grains for 3 months, but they didn't have oil, they didn't have salt, they didn't have chili powder to make actual meals out of them. So that we understood after this incident happened. So then we prepared packets of such auxiliary items that are required in cooking, and we also provided them to these people. Now, apart from that, we have the midday meal scheme. Now, since the schools are no more in operation mode, all the rations that are used to prepare midday meals, those are being also supplied to the students' families. Now, this is the first issue of people who are actually residing in the district. Now, there is also a second category. The second category involves people who are not willing to stay in the district, howsoever we might try to motivate them, tell them that we shall take care of them, but they are not willing to stay, and they are even willing to go and walk, say, 500 kilometers to reach their respective destinations. We actually saw people walking on highways. We actually saw people walking along the railway tracks. Now for that, we adopted a different strategy. For them, we used 24-hour patrolling on the highways along the railway lines. If we saw some people, we took them and we made them stay in a shelter home for a day or two. We provided food to them. We told them we shall prepare and give them the way of their convenience. Then the medical teams went there. They had their medical checkups, and then the buses were provided to them, and buses then left them to their respective destinations. So I think this is the two-pronged strategy that we took, and also the food packets. The third is the food packets in urban areas. We more focused upon, our focus was more upon the distribution of food packets, ready-made food packets. So we had a lot of help from the civil society, the NGOs. They run community kitchen, and from this community kitchen, as I told, we had a team of 20 people. Those took packets from the community kitchens and distributed to those who are needy.
Fantastic. Rishabhji, there are some questions we have on your screen. If you look at the Q&A button from the audience. So if you can take some questions, some of it like you have already touched. But
okay, so first question is like about the lockdown management. So one important issue that we faced during the starting of the lockdown was the law and order issues. As you might recall, there have been certain incidents in places like Indore, where crowd got a bit angry and they fetched stones at the medical staff. Also, as I told, people tend to get depressed within the quarantine facilities. So in order that such situations do not happen, the most important thing is that all the decisions that we take, whether of lockdown, whether allowing the kirana shops to open say from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m., all these decisions, they should be taken with the complete confidence of all the stakeholders involved. And by all the stakeholders, we mean all the political representatives, all the religious leaders, all the departments, the state, and especially the police. It is very important that the administration and police should be on the same page while taking any such decision that basically affects the liberty of people, the movement of people. Second, stray animals. Stray animals was again a major concern. As we know, the stray cattle, the stray dogs, they usually eat the stuff out of the stuff which is thrown away by the eateries, by the restaurants. But since today, as we know, all the eateries are closed down, restaurants are no longer in operation. So there was a real danger of actually these stray animals being starved to death. And there was a major concern that we cannot allow one more front to open when we already have a front of corona to face. So if the animals would have died, so that might have led to an outbreak of a disease. So those efforts were made in time. Veterinary department, the urban bodies, they were made in charge of it and made sure that even the stray animals get food. Second important component of the lockdown, which we took preemptive steps, was the festivals. As you might know, Navratri took place during the lockdown. Also, Ramzan is going on nowadays. So one major thing is that these festivals, we should not allow crowds to occur. We should not allow people to throng to temples. So a two-pronged strategy was adopted in this. First, religious leaders were contacted. They were taken into complete confidence. We told them about the protocols. So we made videos using our simple mobiles and taking a message from them when they guide people not to go to temples, not to go to mosques. Please do prayers in their own homes. So we use those methods to disseminate this information. And second important thing we did was that we installed IPTV cameras in the Garbhagriha of our major temples. For example, the Pashupatinath temple, the Dudakhedi Mata temple. Those are temples that see lakhs of people during Navratri. So while we did IPTV camera live footage on YouTube, many people took the benefit of seeing the Aarti from their homes. So these methods, I think, helped to contain crowds during the lockdown.
Fantastic. I think this idea of putting a camera on a temple so that people can see during Navratri is an amazing idea. There's a question from, since you mentioned about Indore, there's another question which is like regarding Indore itself. That, see, yeah, as you know, the cleanest city of India, Indore, is badly affected with COVID. How are you using technology and social media platforms to spread awareness in Mandsaur, and how are you reaching out to remote areas in the district with essential supplies? So you answered the second anyway, but how do you use IT and social media in this situation?
I think social media is one of the biggest boons in tackling this disease as of now. Firstly, using the platform that we are using right now, the Zoom platform, or there are many other platforms right now, we have totally done away with the meetings. We are holding all the meetings, all the deliberations, even with the political representatives, we are holding deliberations on online platforms. Secondly, the social media like Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp, they are helping us a lot in dissemination of information of IEC. IEC basically means the information, education, and communication. All the posters, all the guidelines of WHO, the basic health parameters. For example, taking the basically how to take your medicine. Now we have given them this arsenicum album 30 medicine. We have given them the CARA. How to take them? What are the precautions that you need to take care before taking such medicines? Whether you need to take any allopathic preventive medicine or not. And if yes, then what are the precautions that we need to take care of? What are the posters that actually help us to develop good habits? For example, covering your face while sneezing, covering your mouth while coughing. For example, taking a healthy diet, taking exercise on a daily basis. All such messages are being disseminated with the help of social media. And again, the collation of data. So I think Google Sheets is one of the best platforms we have today, where multiple people can come together and input the data all at once. So we don't need, like, first of all, I remember, say 3 years back, 4 years back, when we used to collect data from everyone, it used to take us whole day, 2 days to collect even a small amount of data. But now the decentralized data is being taken care of using WhatsApp, using Google Sheets in a very less amount of time. And that is actually helping us a lot for the data analysis part of it. So I think technology is definitely helping us.
Fantastic. There is a question by Atul Paliwal. He is asking that please enlighten us on what are the plans of district administration to bring back normalcy and restoration of regular business and industrial activities so that employment can be generated and money comes to the exchequer.
Okay. So first, let us talk about the existing condition as of now. As an existing condition in the villages, we have opened up Manrega works. We have opened up Pradhan Mantri Awas. In the urban areas and in the touching areas to the urban areas, we have opened up industry where labor can go and work, but again, keeping in mind the social distancing parameters. The masks have to be definitely worn by them throughout the day, throughout their shift. An important thing that I would like to convey here is that the government at both the central level as well as at the state level is in consultation with one of the best brains in the country, best scientists, best doctors, good economists. So all the decisions about the lockdown or the facilities that they have to be provided during the lockdown, those are taken on after many rounds of deliberation. So we need to respect and totally believe in the policies of the government, and whatever policies are being made and laid out are surely for the benefit of the citizens. So I think as and when after say the 3rd of May, the new directions come, we'll follow that.
An additional question is about there's an order regarding opening up of the shops, which came 2 days back. So is it being implemented in your Jilla Panchayat?
Yes, throughout the district, the opening of shops is starting, but on a regulatory basis. Basically, the places where we have containment zones, places from where we have actually received cases, those are being still cordoned off. No shops are being allowed to open over there. But in rest of the area, in the hinterland, we are slowly opening up shops. We are trying to make rosters that such and such shops will be opened on Monday and Tuesday. These kind of shops will open on Wednesday, Thursday. So such kind of parameters are being thought about, and certainly we will open the shops. We will allow the normal economic activity to happen, but in a phased manner, but not in a drastic way.
There is a question by Harshal. He's asked that administration working in panchayat levels are playing crucial role in fighting COVID in rural areas. Are you keeping them all motivated and keep their energy intact?
I think at this point, I would like to convey a great deal of thanks to people who are actually working at the Gram Panchayat level. As I told, we have formed a team of people called a community surveillance team. those teams work day and night. Those teams are basically comprised of who? They are comprised of Pradhan, the Sachiv, the Gram Rozgar Sahayak, our local Asha, our local Anganwadi worker, our local salesman. They are trying very hard that those who are home quarantined, stay in their homes. Those who are in need, actually get the dry rations delivered to them. People who actually go to markets, they maintain social distance. People who are in need of medicines, they do not need to go to hospital and they get medicines on their doorsteps. So such people are really working very hard and round the clock they are working. Yes, one more thing. As I told in the beginning, we have around 700 teams doing active surveillance, going village to village. We do not have that amount of ambulance in our district. No one has. So the community surveillance teams are also providing us with the vehicles that can be used as makeshift ambulances. And they have been trained to use those vehicles as ambulances. For example, they have been provided with the makeshift protective gear so that they do not get infected. We have provided them with bleaching powder so that they can make 1% chlorine solution out of their own, in their own gram panchayat. That can be used for disinfection of the ambulance as well as of the disinfection of the public areas. So I think teams at gram panchayat are really working.
There is a question about what kind of behavioral changes do you see among people and how cooperative or resentful are people? And I think the additional question is that what happens after a month or two? Will the behavior of people remain the same or will it change?
Now, this is a difficult question to answer at this point of time. But I believe that social distancing, I think, would become a part of our life. If it's totally unavoidable, people should not go to places that are crowded. Then people should develop and would be developing. They are developing. What we are seeing right now, people are developing good habits of taking their elbows in front of their nose and mouth while coughing or sneezing, taking efforts to increase their own immunity, taking a good diet. So I think behavioral changes are actually happening in society and they are here to stay. And they will not be easily go back to the previous state.
And there's one more question about how are you going to identify the suspects and their contact tracing? Are you getting voluntary cooperation of these people? What are you doing with those who don't choose to cooperate?
Okay. So as I told, in order to identify the people. So first of all, it's a very difficult disease to manage because most of the patients as of now also are asymptomatic. They are not showing any symptoms. So first of all, it's very difficult to track patients who are actually COVID positive. So the strategy that we have evolved is a combination of the two. First, those who are showing symptoms, and second, those people who may not be showing any symptoms, but they were in contact with patients who are positive, or secondly, those who have come from a place which are showing large amount of outbreaks. So as I told, we have active surveillance teams, those who are going door to door. They are checking for the history. They are checking for the symptoms. Then we have our responsive surveillance teams. Those operate out of the district control room. And as of now, the incidents of non-cooperation are very limited in Mandsaur. People are actually cooperating. And as I told, there are two factors to it. First, if we involve all the stakeholders in our decision making, people will definitely cooperate. And second, if people and the civil society sees that the administration is working in a clean and neat, transparent, bona fide fashion, then people automatically tend to come forward and lend a helping hand. So the issues of non-cooperation actually do not arise.
If you see the wording of the question, there is a word used called suspects and non-cooperation. There are reports in the media that COVID patients are being looked as criminals, and that's why they are trying to hide also. And there is a stigma attached to it. So, is there a effort being made to remove the word stigma from the COVID, and it is being considered as a disease and as a patient, and it's not their fault? And so, are you and there was a case of the COVID patient doing suicide. So, how do you see the mental health issue of a COVID patient?
Yes, actually, that is a big issue. So whenever this is like, we can say the progression of a disease. Whenever a new disease comes, it is seen more of a stigma than a disease. And since this also occurs that whenever a patient who is identified as COVID positive, the whole area is made a containment zone. The whole area is treated as if like an infected place. So it tends to actually infuriate people. So yes, that is true that there would be some people that would be hiding the symptoms. There would be some people that would not be willing to cooperate. But again, the point is how well you manage the situation, whether you treat your containment zones as jails or whether you treat your containment zones as a normal area where only the movement is not allowed and each and every item of the daily use is provided to them on their doorstep. So with respect to the counseling part, yes, we have a dedicated team of psychiatrists. We have a dedicated team of professors who have formed WhatsApp groups with the patients, who have formed groups with the patients who are still not COVID positive, but are in a quarantine facility. We are in touch with them on phone call on a daily basis. Small, we can say, for example, 2 days ago, we had a patient who was admitted to the COVID hospital. So he had his birthday. So we gave him a cake. It was a very small gesture, but it made him really happy. So these kind of small gestures, small initiatives, I would say, they tend to go a long distance in maintaining trust of people with the government, with the administration, that yes, we are not actually convicts, we are not suspects, we are normal patients and we shall be treated and then sent back to homes. And yes, whenever a patient gets treated or has his samples negative, very soon, say within
I think there is some issue in connection. Yeah. So, Vishnu, yeah, we had lost you in for a minute. Yeah. Okay. I think we are done with all the questions, and we would really like to thank you, Rishabh, for answering everything. And we at ALETS are taking this initiative to talk to various districts, various local government officials, and municipal organizations across the country and see that how they are dealing with this really challenging situation. So thanks for taking your time in your busy schedule to answer all these questions, and your suggestions about our efforts to bridge, bring more awareness about the COVID-19 situation in the public. What do you think about this initiative which we are doing at ALETS? If you have any inputs.
I think this is a good initiative. People need to learn more about disease. one major issue that a good, we can say the other side of WhatsApp, everything, that we have a lot of myths that are going around. So such kind of webinars, such kind of conferences are actually helpful for people to actually know what are the protocols, what precautions that they need to take, what actions can they take so as to help the administration to perform in a much more efficient way. So I think this is really good.
Right. So with this, I would like to thank all the audience for joining in here, and for all those who are watching this video on the Facebook. I will request you to please like and share it so that the good work which is happening in Mandsaur reaches to a lot more people, and we learn from the initiatives which are taken by the Jila Panchayat Mandsaur and the District Administration of Mandsaur. And thank you, Rishabh for joining us and giving so much important and very useful information about the initiative which your organization and the Jila Panchayat is taking. So with this, namaskar to everyone. Thank you so much. Namaskar. Thank you.